It is Thandi Sumazwai coming through with Gulungile, coming out of her brand new album Sankofa, which released about a month and a bit ago, and it derives its title from the Ghanaian Twi word meaning to go back and fetch what has been left behind. And of course, this being a continuation of the creative process that began back in 1996 with Thandi Sumazwai and of course her band Bongo Muffin. It's culminated in 4 solo albums, an incredible body of work, and she's currently on tour throughout South Africa, of course, with sporadic tour dates popping up here and there as she promotes and introduces her fans, old and new, to a brand new body of work. It's just gone 1:15 on the Full Circle with myself, Bridget Masinga, on this fine Tuesday. I almost said Monday because, we had a long weekend yesterday, and so we were in here. We were here. We were holding up the fort and doing our country duty, but we were kind of kekelezering a little bit, taking things a little bit slow. So it almost feels like the week is now only officially beginning. We've got lots of show coming up today. We begin by having a conversation around survivor's guilt, trying to weave our way around it, understanding it and learning how to deal with it. And I wonder if, you yourself in your personal capacity have had an incident that has left you struggling with some kind of emotional survivor's guilt, whether there has been a death in the family or perhaps even a death in a relationship or a friendship that has left you really trying to get to grips and get to a handle with the emotions, the residual of the emotions that are left behind. Guilt is a nasty, nasty emotion, and it takes so much for us to just work our way through it. Also coming up today, stages, pages, screens, and more. We're going to be in conversation with a pioneering African creative for that one. On the other side of two, we delve into matters of health and wellness. And remember last week we were having a conversation around infertility, because June is indeed Infertility Month. And then we thought that we would extend the conversation to today because we didn't get around to, quite a number of your inquiries on WhatsApp and your calls. Also, you were a bit late to the party by way of sending us those inquiries. So today we ask that you please, if you have any questions or any points of clarity, anything you want to know about fertility, infertility, reproductive health, if you're thinking there could be issues between yourself, your partner, maybe, you guys have had recurrent miscarriages and you want some advice or clarity, be sure to drop us a WhatsApp voice note on 061-410-4107. That's our WhatsApp line, or 086-000-2032 is the number that you can call us on. And we've got Dr. Liesl Oosthuizen joining us again today for that conversation. So we're going to have a continuation of that conversation on the other side too. A very important conversation, and we do love the fact that when we talk around reproductive health, when we talk around issues of trying to have a baby and the traumas that come with it, the misinformation and everything else that sort of comes with that journey, a lot of the times we get our male listeners who courageously and bravely so share their issues and share their problems. And so we hope that we continue along that vein today by providing a safe space where you can get the right kind of information from a medical expert, Dr. Liesl Oosthuizen, who is, of course, a qualified obstetrician and gynecologist. So this is her arena of play. 061-410-4107 is that WhatsApp number. Let's take a quick break and then we come back and we talk all things survivor's guilt.
Here on SAFM, we honor the contribution of the youth for our liberation. We also celebrate the liberation of our beloved country. Happy Youth Month, South Africa. Arts, culture, and robust conversations with Bridget Masinga.
All right, we're talking to clinical psychologist Mzamo Mbuli now, and we're trying to understand survivor's guilt, right? It's a response of sorts, an emotional, mental response from how I understand to an event where one would have experienced some significant loss. But when we talk significant loss, we're not just talking in the instance of death. Loss can be described in many ways, and loss can have a lot of emotional residual feelings that are attached to it. But let me allow the person who knows better, Mzamo Mbuli, to join us in the conversation. Good afternoon to you, Doc. How are you doing?
Hi, Bridget. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Cannot complain. Thank you for affording us the time. Maybe let's start at the beginning, and let's start by unpacking, the essence of what is survivor's guilt.
Sure. So I liked your intro. Because before we get into survivor's guilt, I liked how you explained loss. So loss is not only it can also extend to maybe losing a job. For example, if we all get retrenched and I don't get retrenched, so that would be survivors.
We just the words are just dropping. Maybe let's try another line there, Doc. We're just losing you every 10 words or so. And weirdly enough, it happens, with the most important of wording. So whilst we try to get the doc back on a different line, our lines are open for you on 086 000 2032 or 061 410 4107 if you are on WhatsApp. And we ask the question of you, is there an incident that has left you struggling with some form of survivor's guilt, some kind of emotional attachment or residual emotion that you've left with, and that you're struggling to work your way around and get a grip on? You are more than welcome to join us on the conversation on 061 410 4107. That is our WhatsApp line, or 086 000 2032. I think we got the doc back on it. Okay, we're still trying to get the doc back on a different line. And we're going to find out more about survivor's guilt, of course, as to what it is and how it affects our lives, and also what other severe emotional and psychological mental disorder it could potentially lead to. So that is what we are trying to figure out with this conversation. And we've got clinical psychologist Mzamo Mbuli, who's joining us on the line. He's back. All right, Mzamo, let's try that again. Hopefully the telephone connection gremlins are behind us. So let's go in with what is survivor's guilt.
Sure. So survivor's guilt, from an emotional perspective, is a specific kind of guilt where someone has lost people, and obviously the one is a survivor. So the guilt comes from, like, why did I survive?
Yeah.
Or another perspective, like, say in a car accident, I've lost a significant family member and I've gained, like, significant injuries. And instead of me focusing on the person's loss, maybe my family member who hasn't survived, I'm struggling with what's happening to me with my physical injuries. So how I would make meaning out of that, like, why did I survive? So if that continues, I mean, it's a normal response, but if that starts affecting how a person functions in daily life, it's like, why did I survive, instead of, like, making meaning, I did survive, I've got these physical injuries that I'm struggling with. That can be a problem from a psychological point of view, but it is a normal response to loss and death or bereavement or grief.
And I think what you say there about that questioning of how to make meaning of it, is that perhaps where the struggle is presented for a lot of people when we talk about, I've been saying, trying to get a handle on the residual emotion. It's the trying to understand that, like the trying to make the meaning of why you've survived and someone else has lost their job or lost their life, for instance.
That's 100% correct, Bridget. But the problem is, I suppose the challenge is if this is continuous, because guilt is not a good way of making meaning out of life. For example, I've lost somebody significant. I should be grieving that person. For example, I've lost colleagues that have lost a job and I stayed. So me feeling guilty about me having a job, me having survived, is not really a good way of making meaning, because that's preventing me from grieving itself. It's a way of grieving, but it's not a very effective way, because I'm not focusing on what's actually happening to me. Even though it sounds like I'm focusing on myself, but like, why did I survive? You're actually not. You're projecting onto other people.
Okay. Let's also talk, because I want to double back to this, right? The prevention of you grieving. And I want to double back onto that and ask then, what will be the healthier way? But I also want to then piggyback at the beginning of this conversation and ask, does an unhealthy survivor's guilt that is not being handled in the healthiest way, or not being interrogated in the healthiest way, can it potentially lead to more severe emotional or psychological disorders, things like PTSD, for instance?
Yes, it can, but I just need to explain.
Sure.
So you've lost, you've had a death, and how you making meaning of that death is focusing on why did you survive? In the long run, in the long term, that's not really healthy, because you're not really processing what's happening to you. I've lost a loved one. What does that actually mean for me, as opposed to, but why did I survive? I've lost somebody that I love, that I had attachment to, and because they're no longer in my life, this is how my life is affected. So in psychotherapy, that's what we try and bring out. Yes, let's make meaning out of it, but maybe let's look at it from a different perspective. Now that you've lost your job, or your colleagues have lost your job, or you've lost a significant other, how is it affecting you? For example, about survivor's guilt. How is it affecting your behavior? How is it affecting how you think about life? If you think about survivor's guilt, why did I survive? Possibly you can have a core belief that you don't believe good things should happen to you. And where does that come from?
Okay. I mean, I get that. It's you asking the right questions, and as you say, you're not projecting, but more so, I don't want to say internalizing, because maybe that's also the wrong term, but you're turning it inwards to probe how is this perhaps an opportunity for you, or how is it's the reframing of it, or how is it perhaps providing you with a different way of moving forward, or a different way of appreciating life, or a different way of doing things, is what I'm understanding.
That's correct. And reframe is actually a technique that we use. So instead of you focusing on the other person or externalizing it, let's focus on yourself. What does this loss mean to you? How is the loss affecting you? So I like the term that you used. It's actually a technique that we psychologists use to reframe perspectives.
All right. And then this obviously speaks to what I said I was going to double back on. It speaks to that notion of what is preventing you from grieving. In part, it's how you're approaching that process.
It 100%. It absolutely prevents you from grieving. Obviously, grieving is not a comfortable process, and that can be one of the things that you're avoiding. The discomfort of having to confront reality, for example, the reality of the loss, the reality that bad things happen to people, the reality of bad things can happen to me, even though I might not view myself as a so-called good person. That's the processing that needs to happen. And to your point, that does prevent a person from grieving, and that's the realm of mental illness. You spoke about depression. In fact, bereavement or grief can be, if it's prolonged, can be a mental illness. 086 rather 000
2032 is the number that you can call us on if you want to chime in live in the conversation, or 0614104107 is our WhatsApp line. And we are talking to a clinical psychologist, Mzamo Mbuli, who's helping us get the tools to work our way around survivor's guilt. Now that we have a good understanding of it, perhaps in the second half of the conversation, we'll come back and just also identify what some of those telltale symptoms or signs could be that could indicate that maybe you are struggling with survivor's guilt, and then how do we overcome it? We've touched a bit on reframing, and then maybe we'll look at some techniques as well. It's 1:30. Madupi Mkhalamele is standing by with the headline news.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 106.6 FM in Bloemfontein.
Thank you very much, Sister Bridget, and a very good afternoon. In your headlines this hour, KZN Premier Taminduli has called on his newly appointed cabinet to set aside their political differences and put the people of the province first. A cell phone expert says the number of one of the accused in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial is registered under a different name. And as protesters in Kenya gather to oppose a new finance bill, the government has backed down and announced the scrapping of some of the proposed taxes. I'll be back with a full news update at 2.
Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
As we continue with our conversation with Mzamo Mbuli, who is a clinical psychologist, let's talk a little bit, Mzamo, about perhaps, some of the tells that somebody could be struggling with survivor's guilt.
Sure. So if you think of our own cultural practices, we obviously have rituals, i.e. a funeral. Mm-hmm. But if you are going through a process of a funeral, but you're inebriated, you're blocking that process. But another helpful way that I like to use is a 7-step processing. So, for example, I feel guilty that I survived. Mm. What do I think about me feeling guilty about that? You write that down. Mm-hmm. Then the second thing you do, you write down, because I feel guilty having survived, what emotions am I exhibiting? Am I angry? Obviously, besides the guilt. Then thirdly, how am I behaving because of the survivor's guilt? Am I withdrawing from people? Am I being more resentful? How is it affecting my behavior? Mm. And then fourthly, how I'm thinking about my survivor's guilt. Where else in the past have I felt like this? Where have I felt guilty for something? Not necessarily survivor's guilt, maybe guilt for not performing well at work. Mm-hmm. I feel like I don't deserve the recognition and the honor that I have at work. So where else have I felt like this? Mm-hmm. And then sixthly, very important, what lie am I telling myself because of the survivor's guilt? Mm. So it's something that you have to think about, give it some thought. And then the last would be, what is the rational truth? So after all of these 6 steps that you've deeply thought about, What is the rational truth? And that's one way of dealing with this.
Mm-hmm. Can we also unpack, and this is, I think, a sentence that's used a lot in your area of practice, and unless you've sat with a psychologist at some point or counselor at some point, you might be lost when Mzamo says to you, ask yourself, what lie am I telling myself? Let's unpack that a little bit. What would the essence of that mean to somebody listening to us now who's jotting down those 7-step processes, and then you throw that out at them and they go, what do you mean? What lie am I telling myself?
So, for example, prior to you losing a significant other, or prior to you having sustained your job and other people, did you think about that? Did you think like that about yourself prior to the accident? Is it something that's long-standing? And we're just assuming now. Possibly not. Mm. So does this one event in my life, according to how I'm thinking now, defines who I am. So it forces a person to think, provokes a person to think differently as opposed to how they're thinking now.
All right. Then we've worked through the 7-step process, and then we get to the other side, Mzamo, and we realize that, okay, yes, I still do have residual feelings. What then do we use from your toolkit to then start compartmentalizing those feelings and perhaps moving towards healing?
Sure. So after the 7 steps, I'm still thinking like this. I still feel like this. Possibly then we have to go a bit deeper. Maybe the guilt is not something that's happening now. It's in my face now because of what I'm experiencing. Maybe I have childhood guilt for whatever, and that's something that we need to unpack, like in therapy. The way that you think about life events and you feeling responsible for other people's, what happens to other people, possibly doesn't come from now, or survivor's guilt, or the loss that you're experiencing now. Possibly it's a long-standing issue, and then there's something else that we'd have to process, because that means that the trauma, possibly in your childhood, is affecting how you think about things now. It's affecting how you process anything or any experience that's happening in your life now. And that would need to be processed.
All right. There's always so much to unpack in the school of psychology, because it is so deep and it is so nuanced in everything and in every conversation. And as just a parting shot, before we get to the seeking of perhaps professional help from people like yourself, mindfulness is a practice that some people would advocate for in these situations. But I presume when your thoughts are cloudy and hazy, it's difficult to also know at that moment what is rational, what is true, and what is the lie that you are perpetuating to yourself. So how do you then exercise mindfulness in this space of haziness?
So apart from obviously going to a psychologist or professional, the feedback that you get from other people is very important. And that helps us with being aware, with being mindful of what's happening to us. So when people tell you and give you feedback, hey, Zamo, you've changed, are you okay? That's feedback. And most of us tend to not accept that feedback. No, I'm fine, or so forth. Or we dismiss it or minimize it. So the feedback that we get from the environment, the feedback that we get from other people is very helpful with mindfulness.
Okay, makes perfect sense to me. Mzamo, I appreciate the time with you today, and that was Mzamo Mbuli. He's a clinical psychologist, and hopefully, he managed to get you to think about whatever situation you might be in right now. If you're finding yourself that you're struggling emotionally, and perhaps you can associate with survivor's guilt, it does resonate with you, then, and you've been trying to figure out your way around it, the next step would be to try and get the assistance of someone like himself, a clinical psychologist, a practitioner in psychology or counseling, just to help you filter and weed through the emotions, and of course also walk with you as you find your way back to healing. 0614104107 is our WhatsApp line. In fact, let's go to WhatsApp for a quick comment, and then we'll come back on the other side of this and get into stages pages.
Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Good afternoon, Bridget. This is Zanele in Durban. Bridget, I went through that grieving, and I didn't know that I was grieving because I was so young by that time when I lost my firstborn. I was still young. But though that grieving took me years, and I've got 4 children now, but I will keep on counting that child. By when I buy something, I will add him. When I tell somebody, or if somebody is asking me how many child I will have, I will count him. And whenever I buy something to eat. Not just I were counting that how many there should be there.
Bridget Masinga on SAFM. Stages, pages, screens, and more with Bridget Masinga.
Oh, Mam Zanele, it's just the emotions that we get left with, the grieving process on its own. So many things that we sort of go through. Thank you for sharing that. It was so good also to hear your voice. We've been wondering with Mam Zanele in Durban. We were about to send an SOS for you. So it was lovely to hear your voice. Our next guest now, Yalizo Njuguna, is a cultural organizer, a creative director and producer, also co-founder of Enruptured Odyssey and BAI Foundation, and we thought we'd catch up with Yalizo and just to find out about the process of being a creative in creative spaces in the here and now. How are you doing this afternoon?
I am good, thanks, and you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Let's talk about your journey through your work, which spans many years, and of course, is touches on very many disciplines within the cultural sectors. Would it be fair to say you're not a one-dimensional storyteller, and perhaps in 2024, for all argument's sake, it's actually advisable for storytellers to diversify how they tell stories?
Yes, I do think it's, especially with the age that we come up with, I think both for people who do want to be for example, a scriptwriter or whatever type of profession, what I found is the more creative professions or creative pursuits you kind of jump into, the more it helps you better even understand how your key profession relates to everything. So yes, I do like exploring the value chain of what creativity can look like and what it means for us as storytellers.
And in fact, your sort of your foray into storytelling began very early in your life, at a very young age, and something that was sparked by books and movies, as well as music videos. Interestingly enough, three distinct disciplines that tell stories in very unique ways.
Very much so. Well, it was that, and also at the time my mom was becoming a broadcaster, and at the time I think one of the first things she said was we actually broke the radio the first time she was on radio because we're trying to get inside the radio to find her. So it's been there was a lot of creativity growing up, and like I really loved the music videos in the early 2000s. They were very, very colorful. They were very creative. They were you'd have like people dancing in multiple places at the same time, and like my 5-year-old brain didn't like think that it was thought that they were teleporting more than that they were actually pressing record, cut, let's go to another location. So I wanted to have that superpower. That's kind of how I remembered it when I was like, okay, cool, this is what I want to do.
And really, it is a superpower, to be able to capture a moment in time and an essence of being, and sort of relay that and reflect that to a society. It really does give creatives that superpower.
Yes, it does. It's a very, especially when you have the space and the grounds to do so. It's a very uplifting and exciting thing to be able to do.
Talk to me about some of the themes that you've explored through the body of your work. Themes around cultural identity as well as human connection.
So as a creative director, so I am a filmmaker. I'm quite a number of things. I'm a filmmaker. I do film festivals. I also do podcasts. And part of how I got into doing media in terms of podcasts and some of the documentary stuff that I was doing was very much when I got into the industry. I really understood a lot about American culture and British culture, from pop culture and everything, based off of watching ETV and all of these things when I was growing up, but I didn't necessarily have a lot to pull from a South African perspective. So part of my passion project then kind of became to start researching and exploring what was going on within the independent space, within different cultural spaces. And that kind of started in as a blog, which then became into a festival. And even now, my first television series is called The Bubbling Culture, which is currently on international streaming platforms, is very much looking at different subcultures and what it means to be a young South African within, for example, international piano spaces, or as a hip-hop artist, or as a viral comedian who's jumping into comedy was from the digital space as opposed to going to clubs and writing jokes for a live space. So it's really focused on trying to understand a lot of the different things about what it means to be young right now, as well as both from a fictional perspective and from a non-fictional perspective. So it's not just non-fictional, but yes, I'm very interested in really trying to capture what it means to be this generation at this particular point in time.
And interesting for me is also the understanding that this particular generation, and I guess it's sort of the generation before as well, millennials, for instance, have had to straddle the dualities of life, right? And I wonder, how much of an influence has Western media and Western culture had on you as a filmmaker, but also juxtapose that to you as an African filmmaker who's finding and living within these dual spaces?
I would say that it's incredibly influenced me, and when I use the word incredible, I don't mean that in a positive or negative connotation. I mean that it's just the amount of influence, because when you come up and you're watching movies and you go to the cinema, majority of the time the movies that you're watching are American movies. When you're even now on Netflix and all of that, it has very much been shaped by Western influences, and then you kind of sometimes get to a point where you then you relate to them in a way that actually in some ways becomes authentic, but then you then want to find a way of making sure that you can still then tell your stories, because there are always things which are specific African, which don't necessarily relate to an American or British experience. So I would say that it has incredibly influenced me, and the journey has then kind of been to come to say, what are the things which then make my stories, but at the same time, the fact that we've all had this experience then makes it also authentic to us. So we shouldn't necessarily shy away from that. We should just find ways of making it our own in a way that isn't American, because our dual experience is of both put together. Am I making sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Don't mind me. I'm just taking it all in. That's why I'm quiet.
Yes, I think it's a merger, because we are in a global society. So the influences won't just be from here; they'll be from everywhere. But then, what are you then putting out to then add to the story? Absolutely.
Bubbling Culture, you say your first international series now out for international viewers. Tell us a bit more.
So the Bubbling Culture is an anthology series. So it's an anthology of documentaries which is focusing on bubbling cultures within the South African space. So what I mean by that is that each episode focuses on a different subculture and all that's currently growing within the South African entertainment industry, and what it took to kind of get that subculture to where it was. So it's hosted by DJ Sabi, and it's six episodes, each 48 minutes, and each episode then focuses on a different space. One of our favorite episodes is actually, we shot this in 2021, and one of our favorite episodes is on the international growth of Amapiano. So what we had is we have people like Musikiz, the Grammy-nominated Musikiz, as well as Kamudi, as well as international broadcasters and DJs who are part of the first people to play Amapiano in the UK, and we track the actual movement of Amapiano from playing on local radio stations to international radio stations, and the different trends of what resonates with Amapiano here as well as there. So it's a very much international episode that was looking at that. We have different episodes looking at the rise of the podcasting space, but also specifically from a South African lens, because part of the things which we found out is, even from a trends perspective, the South African content space online is about 7 years behind in certain ways from, like, for example, American trends, but how that then kind of then trails, how that shows itself, what are the different types of ways that podcasting in South Africa actually looks like, who listens to podcasts. One of the things which we found very interesting was one of the biggest markets for podcasts are actually the over 55 generation. They're one of the biggest people who are listening to them and engaging with them the most. So it then kind of looks at each different subculture that's currently going on in a digital space, but then giving you that information in a fun and interesting way, kind of like one of our references was This Is Pop on Netflix.
Yeah.
So it's like This Is Pop, but instead of it being on big pop things in America, it's on local South African subcultures.
I mean, listen, it sounds like you definitely have your finger on the pulse. I'm looking forward to catching bubbling culture. I love it when creatives archive life in real time. The essence of those generations are often caught so authentically. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your story. And of course, that was a multidisciplinary filmmaker and storyteller Yalizo Njuguna joining us for Stages, Pages, Screens and more. It's just gone 10 to 2 o'clock. It's time now for Kids Corner.
This year, we are celebrating Youth Month under the theme Actively Embracing the Socio-Economic Gains of Our Democracy. As we commemorate the massacre of school children during the Soweto Uprising of 1976, we also celebrate the liberation of our beloved country. Hashtag Freedom30. Hashtag Youth Month. The National Pulse on SAFM.
What for you then, in terms of the now, are the biggest issues that you are concerned with going into this 11th hour of our coalition?
The political parties don't have much time at the moment in terms of dealing with critical issues. Let's take, for instance, what happens in Germany. Now, there's a lot that we can learn from the German experience. I mean, because Germany has been under coalition since the Second World War. Now, within 14 days, it is not possible for the political parties to do that. I think all they've got to do now is to identify key strategic questions facing South Africa. The question of unemployment, poverty, inequality, energy, industrialization, and some of those key questions.
Terry Tselani, the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute for Election Management Services.
The National Pulse, weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m. Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105 FM in Mokopane. This program is brought to you by SABC Education, enriching minds, enriching lives.
Hello, my name is Todd Burgess and I'm 12 years old. Sometimes I do eat cold foods in winter, but I do prefer hot foods. Now that it's winter, I really would like to eat some soup and drink a lot of coffee. I do think it's important to eat hot foods during winter.
Good day. My name and surname is Piovichim Pembe. I am 10 years old. Yes, I do sometimes have cold food during winter. I still enjoy salads, bread, and ice cream. Desserts like pies are also delicious even when it is cold. My body gets really cold when I eat cold food during winter. Sometimes I can't stop my body from shaking. I think during cold winter days, We should eat warm foods and drink hot drinks like hot chocolate to keep our bodies warm and hot so that we do not catch a cold and start sneezing.
Hi SAFM, my name is Angel from Brackeness Primary. I don't take cold food during the winter because I believe I would catch a cold and it will make me feel weak. I think it is important to take warm food during the winter. It will keep you warm and healthy during the winter. Foods like soup and sweet potatoes and drinks like hot chocolate and tea. Thank you.
My name is Monet Angel Ngobera and I live in Gauteng. Yes, I do take cold foods during winter, and the cold foods, not really food, but also kind of snacks and drinks that are difficult for me to stop during winter are ice cream and cold drinks. What happens to my body when I eat something cold in winter is that my nose becomes blocked and I have a really bad flu. Yes, I do think it's important for us to eat warm foods during winter, and the warm foods and drinks that I would like to enjoy now that it's winter are things like warm porridge and tea, like things that are warm and can keep my body warm during winter. Thank you and have a lovely day.
Hello everyone, my name is Ashley Kabamba. I do take cold foods during winter, and some cold foods I cannot resist to have regardless of the season is ice cream and cold cool drinks or juice. Whenever I eat something cold during the winter, I do start to become cold and my body starts to shiver sometimes. I believe it is better eating warm foods during winter rather than having cold meals. And honestly, now that it's winter, some warm meals and drinks I would love to enjoy is hot tea and a hot home-cooked meal.
Hi, my name is Rofrupera Togo. Yes, I mind what I am eating when it's cold because I get sick very often if I eat or drink something that is cold. Some of the food that children should stay away from during winter are cold drinks that have ice in it and ice cream. I think healthy eating through the seasons is important because you need to keep your body fit and healthy.
My name's Ubandi Shongwane. I just eat whatever. It doesn't matter what season it is, I eat whatever. But mostly when it's winter, I eat hot foods. But, sometimes we just take a scoop of ice cream, just to get the taste again. But mostly I do eat hot foods during winter. I feel like foods that you shouldn't eat when it's winter is the ice cream. Even if I do it, I know that it's bad, but please don't eat it. And I also feel like drinking really, really cold things, basically just cold foods. And I say this because you could get very, very sick, right? You could get like a really, really bad cough. I feel like you should eat healthy every single season, every single day of your life, because it gives you a balanced diet. And eating fruits, eating very healthy foods actually protects you from illnesses. When you're healthy, you have enough energy to dance, to move. But when you're not having a balanced diet and you're not eating healthy, you often find yourself weak and tired. So be healthy, everyone, because that's what we want, We want to live long, not to die young.
Hello there, dear friends. Today, let's have a chat about the importance of keeping our bodies warm. When the weather turns cold, it's important to ensure that we stay cozy and warm. One fantastic way to achieve this is by indulging in warm and delicious food. Soup, stew, and hot drinks are excellent choices as they help raise our body temperature from within. Just imagine eating or drinking something warm on a very cold day. The warmth spreads through your body, making you feel incredibly comfortable and snug. This delightful sensation occurs because the heat from the food transfers to your body, keeping you warm even when it's freezing outside. Eating warm food not only provides a comforting feeling, but also helps your bodies function better in the cold. When you consume warm meals, your digestive system works more efficiently. The heat from the food aids in breaking down nutrients, making it easier for your body to absorb and utilize them. This means when we receive more energy from the food we eat, which is specifically important during winter because our bodies require more fuel to stay warm and active. Warm foods like oatmeal, a warm healthy drink, and baked potatoes provide the energy and warmth we need to thrive and learn throughout the day. Another fantastic benefit of enjoying warm food in cold weather is that it boosts your immune system. Warm foods often contain ingredients such as garlic, ginger, and various spices that possesses natural healing properties. These ingredients can help fight colds and infections, keeping us healthier during winter months. For instance, a warm cup of tea with honey and lemon can soothe the sore throat and keep you hydrated. By opting for warm and nutritious meals, you can shield your bodies from common illnesses that tend to spread when it's cold outside. Enjoying warm food together with family and friends can be a wonderful way to bond and create happy memories. Sharing a hot meal can bring happiness and warmth. It's gonna be cold for a few months. Always make sure that you eat some warm food so that you keep your body healthy and energized.
This program was brought to you by SABC Education, enriching minds, enriching lives. Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.7 FM in Cape Town.
The top stories this hour. The new KZN Premier is sworn in and Kenyans protest over a finance bill. A very good afternoon. KZN Premier Taminduli has called on his newly appointed cabinet to set aside their political differences and put the people of the province first. Nduli has been sworn in Pietermaritzburg. The government of provincial unity, comprising of the ANC, IFP, DA and the NFP, elected him as Premier last week. Nduli has called on the members of the executive to serve with dignity.
I appreciate that we come from different political homes and we campaigned with different manifestos. However, now is the time to put the people of KwaZulu-Natal first. All of us are expected to serve with honesty, dignity, and diligently. We must never betray the people of the province that voted for us. There will be a process that will ensure that we monitor and evaluate the performance of every member of the executive.
Vowing to crack down on crime, Nduli has moved the community safety portfolio to his office. Announcing his executive council after being sworn in, the KZN Premier allocated 4 portfolios to the IFP, 3 to the ANC, 2 to the DA, and 1 to the NFP. The ANC's Nomagugu Simelane has been retained at Health. Siboniso Duma is the new Transport MEC, and Siphohlo Muka is the Education MEC. Provincial DA leader Francois Rogers is the new MEC for Finance, and Martin Meyer, also from the DA, is the Public Works and Human Settlements MEC. The IFP's Reverend Musa Zondi is the new Economic Development MEC, while Reverend Thulasizwe Buthelezi is the MEC for Cooperative Governance. Tembeni Mthethwa is at Agriculture, and Mtomuhle Kaula is the new Sports, Arts and Culture boss. The NFP's Mbali Shinga will head the Social Development Department. A cell phone expert says that the number of one of the accused in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial is registered under a different name. The defense had earlier claimed that it belonged to Mthobisi Mncube, one of 5 accused in the gunning down of the Bafana Bafana captain in October 2014. Vodacom's Pinky Vaithelingam is testifying in the trial in the High Court in Pretoria. State Prosecutor Ronnie Sibanda led Vaitelingam's evidence.
As per RICA legislation, is it statutory requirement that a user or a subscriber must RICA their cell phone numbers?
Yes, as per the RICA Act 8922-739 in Tombizini, Majola.
Evidence before this court, case number 3 through his advocate indicated that this number belongs to him. Does his name appear on the record document? Tobisi Prince Nobe.
This does not appear on this RICA information.
A defense witness who is a legal expert has sought to interpret the Firearms Control Act in the case of EFF leader Julius Malema and his bodyguard Adrian Snyman in the East London Regional Court in the Eastern Cape. Martin Hood says the Act has no provisions which make it unlawful to hand a firearm to a person who does not have a firearm license. Malema and Snyman are alleged to have unlawfully discharged a firearm during the EFF's 5th anniversary celebrations at a stadium in Mdantsane in 2018. Malema is charged with contravening the Act, while Snyman's charge relates to handing the firearm to the EFF boss. The Vice President of Cuba, Salvador Mesa, and the Prime Minister of Burundi, Gervais Ndirakobuka, have arrived at the O.R. Tambo Airport in Joburg. They are among the foreign dignitaries that are in the country to attend the inauguration of the President-elect Cyril Ramaphosa. Government says it is finalizing its preparations for the ceremony, which will take place at the Union Buildings in Pretoria tomorrow. A quick reminder that the inauguration of the President-elect will be broadcast on SABC News Live on SABC Plus tomorrow. The proceedings will also be streamed live on the SABC News YouTube channel and SABC Radio. And as protesters in Kenya gather to oppose a new finance bill, the government has backed down and announced the scrapping of some proposed taxes. It says it is listening to Kenyans who are struggling with the rising cost of living. The BBC's Will Ross.
As crowds headed towards Kenya's parliament to reject the new finance bill, there was a sign that William Ruto's government is listening to the complaints over the high cost of living. Some of the proposed tax increases have now been scrapped. These include a 16% levy on bread and a plan to increase fees for mobile money payments. There's been a lot of anger in Kenya about other tax increases already introduced by President Ruto.
The top story at 2 o'clock, KZN Premier Taminduli has called on his newly appointed cabinet to set aside their political differences and put the people of the province first. For SAFM News, Kimudupi Makhalemel.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 106.2 FM in Dohoyando. The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga, Monday to Friday, 1 to 3 p.m.
Kanu tala yorojana ale mason segima. Jarabi tala yorojana ale mason segima. Nterini ngabe diza ni jarabi ma feganyalo nyala. Nterini ngabe diza ni kanu. I want to know. I want to know. bale yara jansigila mabe bonye so ma datina polisa kle wa bebe suka so ma datina polisa suka utina polisa ninmi jaja antenselala so ma datina polisa kle wa bebe suka
It goes down as one of my favorite songs, one of my top 20 favorite songs of all time. Fatoumata Diawara coming through with Ntirini. And of course, in this video is shot by another incredible African creative. She is a professor of photography. Ida Mulina from Ethiopia is behind the lens of this one. And of course, there's a brand new remix of the song. And I've been trying to get, so far, I've only seen DJ Black Coffee play it. He's been on the circuit the last couple of months. He's been in and out of Europe, and he's been the only person that seems to have this particular remix by Kalen. And I've been desperately trying to get my hands on that remix, desperately so. It just, if you love Ntirini and then you love dance and lounge music, the combination of both, Kalen has done incredible with that remix. It's just gone 10 past 2 o'clock on the Full Circle with myself, Bridget Masinga, right here on SAFM, leading the conversation. And of course, our lines are open on 086 000 2032 and 061 410 4107 is our WhatsApp line. Last week, we began a conversation around infertility. June is World Infertility Awareness Month, and it's a time to dedicate towards raising awareness around infertility challenges that are in fact faced by a large number of people across the world. And according to the World Health Organization, around 17.5% of adults, that's roughly 1 in 6 adults worldwide, will experience some kind of infertility. And it is a major health challenge globally. It affects across all income brackets, high, middle, and low. It affects across all borders of the world, all ethnicities, and all age groups where, you know, one's physical being and biology is ready for reproduction. Well, more concentrated in specific, let me actually edit that, more concentrated in specific age demographics. And we thought we'd invite Dr. Liesl Oosthuizen back to join us in this conversation that we began last week. And Dr. Liesl is a general obstetrician and gynecologist. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Liesl. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me back.
Listen, I should be thanking you because, you know, we know how busy your schedule is. And so we appreciate the fact that you could clear out the calendar for us once again. We don't take it for granted at all. And just a recap, you know, when we talk World Infertility Awareness Month, when we talk infertility, what are we talking about? Because we obviously have some folks who listened to us last week and some folks who are listening to us for the first time today.
Sure. So infertility in its strict diagnosis is when any couple has been trying to conceive for the period of 12 months or 1 year with regular unprotected intercourse. So that's 2 to 3 times a week. Obviously no form of contraception, and very much whether or not there is the intention of trying to fall pregnant or not. And that's quite important just because a lot of couples will say, well, I've been trying to fall pregnant for 6 months, but if you actually look at the history of unprotected intercourse, it might have been much longer. The side note to that, though, is that any couples where the female partner is older than 35 should definitely present after 6 months. Although you don't meet the criteria of the definition of infertility, this is when we actually want to be getting a bit more active about making diagnoses and trying to get the right treatment options, as well as any patient who has any known prior conditions, such as polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, or a problem that is known on the male side with the sperm, for example. They should all seek help sooner rather than later.
Let's also tap into some of the known symptoms that we touched briefly on last week, because I think last week we had a more general conversation. Let's look at what you've just mentioned, for instance. Known symptoms like polycystic ovarian syndrome. What are we talking about there when we're talking polycystic ovarian syndrome?
So polycystic ovarian syndrome is an incredibly common finding in a lot of women, and there are different aspects to this diagnosis. So we've got criterion we use to diagnose this, but that's getting quite technical. What we will often see in women with polycystic ovarian syndrome is very irregular cycles. Now, that could vary from having a period, for example, every 6 weeks to every 3 months to sometimes only once or twice a year. Some women with severe polycystic ovarian syndrome might not actually get a period even at all. So the underlying issue we need to address there is the fact that if you aren't having a regular cycle, you are probably not ovulating. And if you aren't ovulating, you're not in the game of trying to get pregnant, because we need you to ovulate that egg. Other symptoms that women with polycystic ovarian syndrome might or might not have, it depends on how exactly it presents, is problems with acne, problems with excess hair on the body that they don't like, typically a bit more masculine hair. They might have difficulty with weight loss, and there might also be an association to the metabolic syndrome. So women who maybe are pre-diabetic or insulin resistant, they might have cholesterol issues, and that we might need to pay a bit more attention to what's going on in the diet from a lifestyle point of view. So typically patients with polycystic ovarian syndrome will come to us and say, I don't have a regular period, and then we'll do an examination, find some of those things, as well as typical ovaries on an ultrasound that are full of little eggs. And the most important part of that name, polycystic ovarian syndrome, is to completely ignore the word cyst.
Okay.
I hear time and time again women saying to me, I have cysts all over my ovaries. When you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, those are actually all the little eggs that were told to grow by the ovary that month. And usually only one of them will go on to dominate and ovulate. The rest of them will all die out. But if you aren't ovulating those eggs, you end up accumulating a lot of them in the ovary, and so you get this Swiss cheese kind of look to an ovary. But very, very clearly, it's not cyst. The word cyst implies that there's something wrong. This might be a syndrome of not ovulating, but these are not cysts that need to be medically managed.
I see.
So that would sort of summarize what's going on with polycystic ovarian syndrome. Then we have other conditions such as endometriosis, which typically will present to the doctor with very painful periods. Now, every woman is going to be different, and if you have painful periods your entire life, you might not even know that that's abnormal. So my marker is always to ask someone, if you have no painkillers available and you got your period unexpectedly, is the pain bad enough that you would consider cancelling your plans for the day? So any kind of pain that would interrupt your plan for the day is significant. Any pain that relies on you having painkillers is significant. I also like to ask the partner, what is her period pain like? Because quite often she's very used to it, whereas he's actually seeing her go through these, or she's seeing her female partner going through all of these symptoms every single month. So it helps to get their perspective on it. Some of the other things we might consider that could be just more significant than just period pain is painful urination, painful passing of stool during your period, or pain during intercourse. Those are all warning signs that something abnormal is going on and that deserves more attention.
And then we also, last week, because this is a diagnosis that has just come into the realm of my existence, And the more I read, the more I learn, the more I see on social media, it seems like it's a diagnosis that catches a lot of people off guard for many reasons. We spoke a little bit, and I'm sure I get the pronunciation wrong. We spoke a little bit about adenomyosis, which is closely related to endometriosis, but slightly different.
Correct. So I always like to think of it as the wicked stepsister of endometriosis. So endometriosis is the lining on the inside of the uterus that we shed every month if you have a period. That lining needs to grow up so that it's at the right state to actually accept a little embryo and to allow a pregnancy. And if there is no pregnancy, then we shed that lining on the inside of the uterus. If that lining, for a variety of reasons, starts to grow in little areas in the tummy that it shouldn't be, then you can start presenting with endometriosis. It might grow on the lining of the stomach, so around the pelvic area, on the thin little lining on the inside. It could grow near the tubes. It could grow on the ovaries. It can even make big cysts in the ovaries called an endometrioma. And it can actually come in different forms. One form is very much like someone's taken a can of paint and they've sprayed the pelvis. You might have these little, sort of gunshot powder lesions, so it looks like someone's just spray painted. Or you can get these little pebbles that form, so little hard nodules that form that we actually cut out when we find it at surgery. And quite often that's what's causing the pain. Those are little pockets of lining that have grown in the wrong place. And when they grow there, every single month, as you're growing and shedding your lining inside of the uterus, the same thing is going on inside of your pelvis. And there's a lot of inflammation, irritation. You start to develop scar tissue, and that's how it can actually start affecting your chances of conceiving, from how well you ovulate down to how many eggs you have, whether your tubes are able to work the way they should, whether the anatomy is completely normal or distorted, or even something as simple as if you have such severe period pain that you have just zero interest in intercourse, then you're definitely not going to be able to fall pregnant. So adenomyosis, which is always I call the wicked stepsister, is when that lining grows into the muscle of the uterus. So it's not really sitting anywhere else in the pelvis, it's specifically in the muscle of the uterus. And you get these little islands of the endometriosis inside of the muscle of the uterus. That's something that we're starting to recognize a lot earlier in our patients. Previously, the traditional patient, and when I was in medical school, this is what we were taught. Your 45-year-old woman who came along with severe period pain, heavy periods, and they were going on for very long. That would be the woman that would land up having a hysterectomy traditionally, and then we would send off the uterus for testing, and the pathologist would tell us there's adenomyosis.
Yeah.
Then we started to realize we can actually see it on MRIs, and now with the more advanced ultrasound and with knowing what to look for, we're actually diagnosing it in women in their 30s because we can find those subtle features on the ultrasound. And what we do know is very mild forms of adenomyosis are symptomatic, so they might cause heavier periods and increased bleeding times. It's only when it starts getting very severe that it actually starts to affect where your lining is and the actual anatomy of the uterus that it can start to cause problems with fertility. It's incredibly common. When we look for it, you will find it. It's one of those diagnoses. But it's definitely not only in women in their 40s anymore. We are definitely seeing it in the 30s.
And the worrying thing is, like I said, the reason I bring it up is because it's recently orbited the realm of my existence. And the worrying thing is that when you do a lot of research, it still presents as very much underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed. I've heard stories of women that have been under the the care of specialty gynecologists who missed it until they went to an IVF professional who caught it almost instantly.
100%. It's because you need to know what you are looking for. And from a fertility point of view, we are very critical when we look at a uterus. We're very critical when we look at the lining. And we're critical about the interaction between those two areas because we want to know how your lining is going to respond when we're doing a fertility treatment to make sure it's optimal for the implantation of an embryo. So it will be missed quite often. The other problem is that period pain is often dismissed as something, every woman will have it, just suck it up and take your painkillers. With endometriosis, we know on average it takes about 7 years to make that diagnosis. And it's only as we're getting more and more aware of it that more patients are able to be diagnosed with endometriosis and access the correct treatment. The exact same thing is happening with adenomyosis, where a lot of people still think you can't make that diagnosis without the histology from a hysterectomy, which is obviously a major life-changing surgery. Whereas now, with the right tools, we know how to diagnose it earlier and then offer treatment options.
086 000 2032. The doctor is in the house. Dr. Liesel Oosthuizen is joining us, and she is an obstetrician and gynecologist. We're talking around fertility health. It is June. It is World Fertility Health Awareness Month. This would be our second and final installment with the good doctor. So if you have any questions or any points that you need some kind of guidance or maybe some clarity, she can point you in the right direction of the right professional that you should be seeking their consult with. Please feel free to send through your voice notes now, or you can give us a call on 086 000 2032. And as usual, on Tuesdays when we talk to a medical professional, a doctor specifically, we do make the disclaimer that she's just here to impart her wisdom and knowledge. And then should you require specific consultation for your case, you can either make a follow-up one-on-one appointment with her for a proper medical consult, or you can find a medical professional in your region that can help you dig a little bit deeper. But now, this time around, perhaps the conversation would have helped you to frame some of your thinking when you go into that doctor's office, because it can be very, very daunting indeed. Maybe let's jump to our phone lines first, because Anonymous in the Eastern Cape has been waiting for a while. How are you doing, Anonymous?
Good day, SAFM and all your listeners. I'd like to greet your guest, Doctor, today. How are you, Doc?
She's all right. She's listening to you on mute, so go ahead.
Awesome. All right. Look, a quick one, SAFM. In the province of the Eastern Cape, I am running 3 healthcare facilities where we concentrate mainly on women's health. And our self-created statistics is telling us that we are seeing an increase in both men and women who have taken the COVID-19 vaccine who are now infertile. Mind you, they have been having children, or they do have children, but after that, you see that when they come in for family planning, they are now infertile. So I want to know from the doctor, is there a direct link between the spike protein that is found within the vaccine? Is there a direct link of that that's causing men and women today to be infertile? And the second question is, talking about the spike protein shedding. Now, this is from the male perspective. Do men in their sperm, can they carry it through to the female, an unvaccinated female, and as a result, that unvaccinated female is no longer to bear kids or rendered infertile? So
Okay.
I just want to find out, is there any direct link between that?
Okay, thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, Anonymous. I mean, I don't know if that's a fair question to pose to Dr. Liesel in her private capacity as an obstetrician and gynecologist, because it almost seems like a question, Doc, that would need WHO and all kinds of pharmaceutical bodies to have looked at comparative data.
Are seeing published by the big American associations and the European associations is there is no proof that the COVID vaccination causes infertility. There's also no proof that the actual COVID infection causes infertility, but this is going to be incredibly difficult to study just because we're having to take population studies here, and not every single person is going to react exactly the same to COVID. The same as some people will have long COVID and other people get it and recover completely fine. So you're going to need to find that pocket of people perhaps with long COVID and do testing on them to see if there's any impact on fertility. Anything where you have a very high fever potentially is going to cause damage to sperm temporarily. And any issue that you have now with the sperm is going to only reflect in 3 months' time. In terms of the sexual transmission of it, there's no evidence for that at all, and we haven't seen any effect of COVID on the actual gender. Time to evaluate what they wanted from their life. There were a lot of career changes as well. So we did see a lot of patients sort of coming in to the fertility care realm after about a year or so from recovering from COVID, simply because things had changed in their life and their situation. They'd reevaluated. So we might find patients who had an underlying problem with infertility who are now presenting because of other reasons. But unfortunately, we don't have that data to give us any link between the COVID vaccine and fertility problems.
Makes sense to me. Our lines are open in 086 000 2032 and 061 410 4107 is our WhatsApp line. If you have a question and ask a point of clarity for the doctor, we are talking infertility, both males and females, perhaps in the context of your relationship. You guys have been trying to have a baby for a while now, and you want maybe just the lead as to what is the next step that you could take, in as far as that journey is concerned. And also remind me, after the headline news, let me come back and tell you about this fantastic competition that we're going to be running tomorrow. If you want to come join me and my team in Makanda next week, we're going to be out at the National Arts Festival.
A very good afternoon with the news headlines. Dignitaries have started arriving in the country ahead of the inauguration of the President of South Africa tomorrow. KZN Premier Taminduli has called on his newly appointed cabinet to set aside their political differences and put the people of the province first. And Thailand's Senate has passed a landmark bill that will allow same-sex marriages after years of campaigning for a change in the law. Details of these and other stories, 3 o'clock.
Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Hi, Bridget. I'm the first time caller. Well, sending a message on WhatsApp, of course. I'm 52 years old. So what I want to find out from the doctor is, I've been on a contraceptive pill for many years. So I stopped using the pills in May. So now, this month I didn't get my period as supposed to. Should I wait to see if I stop going on my periods because I've reached that age? Is it safe for me to have a unprotected sex?
I suspect we might see a late Lamaki at some point. I'm joking. We are in conversation with Dr. Liesel Oosthuizen, who is a obstetrician and gynecologist, OBGYN. Her area of focus is on, of course, feminine medicine. We're talking all things infertility. We're talking reproductive health with her. This is our second session. We had our first session with her last week, and so she's indulging us again this week. 061 410 4107 is our WhatsApp line, or 086 000 2032 if there's something that you need to clarify by way of your reproductive health. You're having some kind of maybe fertility challenges. Maybe you've suffered recurrent miscarriages and you want a way forward, or some advice of a way forward, or you're struggling to conceive. Even you, gentlemen, we invite you to this conversation. Dr. Liesel, so 52
Yes.
from what I gathered, contraceptives for all these years and stopped in May. I almost expect that there'll be a delay in periods.
So it's not so much the fact that she's been on a contraceptive for long. I think the issue is it's probably menopause. The average age of menopause is round about 52 in South Africa anyway. So most likely this could actually be menopause, and essentially the contraceptive pill was the thing that was bringing on the cycle, very much like hormone replacement previously. The bottom line is there's never a time that is safe to have unprotected intercourse for a variety of reasons. Realistically, the odds of getting pregnant at 52, I mean, to be honest, that would be quite miraculous to conceive at 52. So I wouldn't worry from a pregnancy point of view, but what I would worry is obviously from an STI point of view. So there should never really be a role for unprotected intercourse unless you are in a monogamous relationship. I think it probably is always worthwhile to go and see your gynae. I don't think there's a rush necessarily because you skipped one period to go and see, do I need to get checked out for menopause? But we also have to bear in mind that we're trying to be well women. So we're trying to make sure that we are aging with our bones intact and our breast health as well. So we need to make sure that you're going to your gynae still once a year, getting your pap smear, checking your mammogram, getting your bone density checked as well, and assessing for any other risk factors you might have, such as undiagnosed blood pressure or diabetes. So I would still recommend making an appointment to see either your well woman specialist or your gynecologist for a checkup, not necessarily to make that diagnosis of menopause, but to rather plan for how we are going to keep you healthy in those years.
I want to double back to a little side nugget that I picked up from that conversation around COVID, right? And you said that anything with a high fever may have a cause and effect on your sperm.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So we know that any high febrile illness, and I mean that could be, in our context, obviously we see things like the flu is going around at the moment. We see when patients have malaria, for example, and spike recurrent high fevers, it's that temperature that your body is trying to regulate, and we know that that can actually impair your sperm production. And it takes on average about 76 days from the point where sperm starts being produced to the point it's mature and it's ready to be ejaculated. So any infection that happened roughly 3 months ago could have an effect on where you are now currently. It's not a permanent effect unless you have an infection called mumps. Now, mumps is very common, but we do know that it can actually cause an inflammation inside of the testicle, especially in young boys, and that can actually result in you having problems with the sperm when you are older. So having the diagnosis of mumps is very important information.
061-410-4107 is our WhatsApp line, and it is open for you if you would like to send through a voice note for the doctor, and maybe you want a point to clarify or get some medical guidance, or 086-000-2032 is the number that you can call us on. Should we go to the phone lines? Alusha?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
Good, thank you. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so happy because just yesterday I was literally having a book launch on the quest for a child, and my uncle just phoned me and he said, tune into FAFM to listen. You are discussing exactly the program that I had, doctor. And just to make a comment, this morning I had one of the guests responding to say, I have been suffering, they said it's hernia for the longest time, and it's only now that they recently diagnosed it as endometriosis. And she was able to obviously interact with the program that we had yesterday, because even the same person who shared this is now close to 60, and unfortunately they still don't have a child now because this was not diagnosed earlier. Now, what is the struggle in coming up with the correct diagnosis when it comes to endometriosis? And another aspect that I just wish to share with the listeners is the mental health exit that we had with us at the book launch touched on the issue of treating mental health simultaneously with infertility because of the impact that it actually has on couples conceiving. I personally, the reason I wrote my book is it took me about 7 years moving from PCOS, overactive thyroid, bilateral tubal occlusion, failed IVF, and finally antiphospholipid syndrome. So I really struggled for the longest time with close to 4 miscarriages before finally having our child. So the main point is now, I said, I want this information to be out there and I want people to come. But the truth is, doctor, as much as this is a difficult subject in terms of creating awareness.
Yes.
It was so difficult to get people who are going through this challenge to actually come in, just to come and attend. I had people who said, I'm paying for a couple.
Alusha, thank you so much for your contribution. And that's the thing, Dr. Liesel, is that infertility can become a vicious cycle. And it sounds like Alusha personally has gone through a gauntlet of diagnosis. And she's, she precursed it by saying, what is the struggle of getting the correct diagnosis? Are we seeing a struggle within the medical fraternity of pinpointing the correct, exact diagnosis?
Definitely. There's definitely a problem, and that's why it can take on average about 7 years to make this diagnosis. I think when young girls present with period pain, it's often sort of swept under the rug, or they put on a contraceptive pill to try and control that pain, which actually controls the symptoms, and so they go undiagnosed while they're still on their contraceptive pill. The other thing is that a lot of women sort of just accept that they're going to have painful periods, so they don't necessarily seek advice for it. When they do seek help for it, the difficulty is there's no blood test or specific diagnostic test that you can easily do that will confirm the diagnosis. When it comes to endometriosis, there are multiple different forms of it. And the form where you have the cyst in the ovary, you can see on an ultrasound. When you have those little pebbles that are growing, if you have an experienced ultrasonographer or someone in the realm of fertility care, they will be able to diagnose those lesions. But if you have that form that's sort of been spray painted on the inside of your pelvis, you won't see that on an ultrasound. The only hint you will have is if everything seems quite stuck down on the ultrasound, and we can assume then that there's scar tissue. Endometriosis is not the only thing that causes scar tissue, so it does start raising your suspicions when you see that with the history of pelvic pain. The only way to make the definitive diagnosis is surgically. So to put a little camera in through the belly button, do a keyhole surgery, and make the diagnosis. We can visually diagnose it. We can send off samples to the lab to make a histological diagnosis. But a lot of the time we need to ask ourselves, do we actually need that solid, concrete evidence that that is the problem in order to either access fertility treatment or to manage the symptoms? What you can always do when you have a very high index of suspicion and someone is not trying to conceive is put them on therapy for endometriosis. If it improves, then you know you've probably got your correct diagnosis. If it doesn't, then you start saying, well, perhaps we should consider surgery to try and understand what's going on and improve that person's quality of life. When it comes to fertility, you would rather just go directly into fertility treatment and deal with that issue and deal with the pain as a secondary problem, because obviously pain will be resolved while the patient is pregnant, and then post-delivery you can start looking at treatment options for endometriosis then.
Yeah, and a big shout out while we're on this conversation, shout out to the likes of Discovery who've responded to the call of so many women who, fertility specialists will tell you now that women are being diagnosed younger and younger with fertility problems. And before, it was a mission to get these big medical schemes to pay for this. And now they've forged forward and they've said, you know what, in fact, we are going with obviously certain allowances and things, but on the main, they've now opened up the funding for fertility, reproductive issues. Let's go to WhatsApp quickly and see what's on there.
Afternoon, Bridget. If you are somebody, you have epilepsy, but it is not severe. It may happen once a year or after 2 years. Is it safe to get pregnant? It won't damage your baby inside. Again, if you are somebody who doesn't get pregnant very soon, and then after you get pregnant, if your baby is 6 months old, can you conceive very soon to get another baby so that when your pregnancy stops, you have already 2 babies within 2 years? Thank you, Bridget.
All right, Dr. Liesel, I know that Ashraf is here and standing by to let us know what's coming up, but maybe we can jump on this one quickly. Epilepsy and the 6-month pregnancy and then pregnant again after 6 months.
Sure. So when it comes to epilepsy, we need to be very aware of the drugs that are being used. So provided that a woman is well controlled, so she's not having frequent seizures, which is what it sounds like, then there's no reason that she can't conceive. But she needs to make sure that the medication she is on is safe in pregnancy, as some of them are not. And she needs to be on an excess dose of folic acid, because many of the drugs that are used in epilepsy can actually affect what's happening with the baby's brain and neural tube development. So it's very, very important to consult your doctor who manages your epilepsy to make sure that they are happy for you to conceive and to make sure you are on the right medication. Then it's just about very good seizure control, because a third of women will remain the same, a third will get worse, and a third will actually improve in pregnancy. So we just need to make sure that you are at the right level of care with your obstetrician. From the waiting to conceive and whether it's safe to do it at 6 months, I mean, as long as you're ovulating, you can technically fall pregnant. The question is whether that's a good idea or not. Number one, you're coming out of a very difficult experience. Having a newborn is not an easy thing. Postpartum depression is very, very prevalent these days. You have to make sure that you are ready to actually try and conceive at that point. Secondly, it will depend on what happened in your pregnancy, and it will also depend on whether you had a cesarean section or a normal delivery. We tend to sort of promote an 18-month gap between pregnancies just for health of the baby, or even closer to 2 years, simply because the data is telling us that those babies do better with fewer complications in pregnancy. But there are many women who do conceive very quickly, especially patients in the fertility world who are coming back for a second baby. They might come back quite soon, and then we just need to double check that the woman is well healed and in the right sort of health band to be able to conceive.
Yeah. Dr. Liesel, thank you so much for your time. Truly, we appreciate it, and for sharing your wealth of knowledge. That was Dr. Liesel Oosthuizen, and she is an OBGYN obstetrician gynecologist. That is how we wrap it up on this conversation today. Remember, by the way, that we're going to give you an opportunity tomorrow to join me in Makhanda for the National Arts Festival, celebrating 50 years this year. And this is an all expenses paid. All expenses paid. Come, let's have fun at Makhanda. So we're talking flights, we're talking 2 nights accommodation, we're talking tickets, and we'll tell you the mechanics of it tomorrow. For now, though, Ashraf.
Set in a gleaming new high-tech trauma center that deals with only the most serious cases, an emergency medical team must battle through the crucial first hour of care to save lives that hang in the balance. Each distinctive case is told with a thrilling intensity and nail-biting urgency as the team work on the very edge of the medically possible. This is a medical drama like no other. This is Critical. Mondays to Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on S3. Starts 11 June. Channel your best drama with BBC Primetime, only on S3. Open up.
Do you remember the cool times of Sports Buzz?
Coming up on Sports
Buzz used to be the go-to young people sports show in Mzansi Africa. The multi-sport award-winning youth magazine show. A great platform that profiled young athletes and teams. The glory days of Sports Buzz are back in a newly revamped youth sports show with a wow vibe. Goats like us. Yeah, goats. Greatest of all time. Experience youth excellence in sport. Profiling of active athletes and teams. Latest news in the world of youth sport. The active voice of school sports and promoting a healthy lifestyle among the youth. Do not miss out on Goats Like Us. Your front row seat awaits you every Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. #Goats, greatest of all time. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
What is it about the rest of us that you don't like? That people who want to go and live in Oranje feel they need to go and live with people only like themselves? I mean, what have the rest of us done?
No, it's nothing like that. It's a community within the South African community of communities. I mean, if you go to a place like Komaggas or Concordia or Steenkop, all Northern Cape communities, nobody asks that. Nobody asks, why do you stay here where you are only Namas or whatever. The idea of having a community continuing itself, we want to, in a certain sense, structure our relation with the rest of the country, and in this case with the provincial government. There's nothing funny about that.
Dr. Wynand Boshoff, thank you, leader of the Freedom Front Plus in the Northern Cape.
SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes, 6 to 9 a.m. Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
Oh my gosh, I'm completely chasing the minutes today, so I'm going to make it short and sweet. How are you doing, Ashraf?
Yeah, I'm very well. Good indeed. Thank you.
Awesome. You enjoyed the long weekend?
Yeah, it is, because I haven't seen you since Thursday. So it's like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Since then, we've had a new president, if I can call it that. We've had June 16th. We discussed podcasting. We've had June 16th. We've had Eid al-Adha. We've had so many things in the last few days. Yeah.
Listen, it's been a lot. What's coming up this afternoon?
So we speak to the newly elected Deputy Speaker of Parliament. That's Dr. Annelie Lotroit, rather. Looking forward to that conversation. And then there is the foreign dignitaries arriving in South Africa for the inauguration of the president tomorrow, right? We're not going to have that big amount that came the last time, the very first one. Remember that first one, 94? That's another conversation. And there's been responses on that Government of National Unity from COSATU, from the South African Medical Association, and from a Ugandan thought leader. Need I say that they're not very complimentary, but let's hear it out. All that coming up, yeah.
I doubt any of the responses right now are going to be complimentary. That's Ashraf Garda coming out between 3 and 6 on the National Pulse. We're going to take a quick pause and then we come back and we wrap it up talking to Dr. Gerard Marman in just a moment.
Arts, culture, and robust conversations with Bridget Masinga.
As we wrap it up from our side, we're looking at hashtag Men's Health Month. There's a lot going on in June. It just seems like June 2024 isn't as pity. And we're looking at a survey on men's drinking habits commissioned by the South African Rooibos Council, which highlights some interesting findings. To help us understand what those are, Dr. Gerard Marman is joining us now, a biomedical scientist and leading Rooibos researcher. How are you doing this afternoon, Dr. G?
I'm good, thanks. Yourself?
I'm fantastic, thank you. Okay, so there's this national survey that was released now during Men's Health Month, and it's unveiling some fascinating insights. Share with us, firstly, why was the survey undertaken? Is it a regular survey?
So thank you. So, well, it's not a regular survey. We did it once over April and May. And it's important for us to delve deeper into and understand the beverage preferences of men in South Africa. And of course, this is important because we know that men suffer from a lot of health issues in South Africa. We know like heart attacks, prostate cancer, liver cancer, low sperm motility and so forth. So it is important for us to figure out what they drink and whether they drink healthy beverages, especially like rooibos.
I see. Now, what were some of the findings from the survey? And then we'll dig into how those then tie in to the general health of males.
Yes. So one of the important things that we found was, so the question that was posed to 700 of these respondents was, so if you start your day in the morning, what is the beverage that you prefer? And 46% of the men said coffee, while 30% of the men actually said rooibos. So that comes to just over 200 of the men that said they want to start the day with a cup of rooibos. So that's very interesting. And then, of course, 42% of those men drink at least 1 cup of rooibos daily, and 22% of them actually drink about 2 to 3 servings of rooibos a week. So it seems that South African men are actually drinking quite a lot of rooibos.
I mean, that's very interesting, but do we believe them, Dr. G?
Yeah, well, we have to say that the survey was only done in 700 men. So we have to acknowledge this, right? There are 29.1 million men in South Africa. So 700 is really a small sample. So we have to sort of take the results and the findings against the context of that. So, yes, I think the men that responded to the survey are most likely the rooibos drinkers anyway.
All right. And then let's look at the age groups, within some of this insight. What was the age demos here?
Yes. So Gen Z, So those are your ages 18 to 27.
Mm.
So they made up about 30% of the men in the survey, so over 200 of them. Then Gen X, which is the age groups 44 to 59, they were at 35%. And it seems like the biggest, consumers of rooibos amongst men is the silent generation, actually. So around about 79.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very, very interesting. By the way, when did we millennials now move to being Gen X, Dr. Z?
Well, yeah, well, I have to say, I think I forgot to mention that the millennials actually ranked at 48%, eh?
Yeah, we are always the ones doing the right and proper things, might I add. We are always the ones. Now, how do these sort of the beverage preferences then speak to some of the health conditions maybe that we're seeing that are prevalent specifically among South African men?
You see, it is very important that we look at the number of men that drink something as healthy as rooibos, because rooibos is very high in antioxidants.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the research has shown over the years that if you drink, at least if your diet is high in antioxidants, that it can actually reduce cardiovascular disease, it can increase the sperm motility and concentration, and it can protect against cardiovascular disease. So it's encouraging to see, first of all, that South African men are drinking a lot more rooibos. But I think we can push this a bit further and see that we can get a lot more South African men to drink this to them.
And, we just came from a conversation with Dr. Liesel around fertility, for instance. And so when you speak around matters that could somehow affect fertility and, of course, just general health, things like cholesterol and things like that, in what quantities should we be offsetting? Because a lot of the dietitians who we've had on the show, for instance, will say it's very difficult to say to somebody, put down your glass of, whiskey or whatever it is. Rather, let's try and counter that with the intake of the more healthy something. So how do we then get men to sort of strike the balance there? Because they definitely are not putting down that cold bev or, that glass of vino.
Well, they definitely not, and we're not saying probably that they should. But, like you said, we have to counteract, and I think it is important to get that. So the research has shown in terms of the number of cups of rooibos that you need to drink. So it's sitting at the moment at around about 6 cups of rooibos per day that are shown to be very protective, especially to the cardiovascular system. So, but we have to acknowledge, 6 cups of rooibos, that's quite a lot.
Even for me.
Yeah. So I think a lot of research, myself as a rooibos researcher, a lot of the research is going towards pushing the technology into ways that we can say, how can we improve the way rooibos is made, right, out on the farms, so that the way it is made could perhaps increase the concentration of the antioxidants, and then one can sort of drink less cups, but still have the same level of healthy benefits.
So I'm onto something with my 2 tea bags in 1 cup.
Yay, I'm telling you.
Dr. Gerald, you've definitely given, but if we're being realistic though, considering that we also advocate for people, just a parting shot, considering that we also advocate for people to drink 6 to 8 glasses of water a day, rooibos tea is considered as you drinking water because it's not caffeinated, if I understand correctly, right?
Yes, exactly. That's a beautiful way of looking at it. So rooibos is not caffeinated, not at all, but it's got these beautiful antioxidants. It's almost a balance of about 6 to 7 different types of antioxidants that you get in rooibos. So what would be even amazing is, for example, the survey showed that men, when they do exercise, they actually prefer rooibos as something to sort of hydrate themselves. Now this is amazing because you can still drink your water, and then you can top it up with a cup or two of rooibos.
There we go. I definitely going to take some of that advice, even myself. That was Dr. Gerard Merriman. Thank you so much for the time. And he's a biomedical scientist and, of course, a leading rooibos researcher. You heard, ideally, you should be taking in about 6 cups of rooibos a day. So maybe you just split the difference between the rooibos and the water to get you to the right kind of percentages. And then you're on the right track right there, right? All for better lifestyles and better living. That is how we wrap up the show this afternoon. Hope you got some great advice from Dr. Liesl Oosthuizen on that very, very important conversation around infertility. If you missed it, you can double back to our podcast. There's also the first part of the conversation that we had last week, Tuesday. It is available via safm.co.za on podcast, and then you can follow it up with this week, Tuesday's conversation. And last week it was more generic, and this week we focused a lot on issues around adenomyosis and endometriosis, as well as polycystic ovarian syndrome and a few questions in between. So it would be a good thing for you to double back and listen to both of them, and even listen to them as a couple together if you think that there could be some issues there and perhaps you need some guidance or point of reference. Uguti, how do you move forward? It would be a great podcast for you guys. You heard the doctor giving those guidelines, saying if you've been trying to conceive for 12 months to a year and you are frequently and regularly having intercourse without any positive result, there could be a problem. And if you're on the other side of 35 and you've been trying to conceive, for the last 6 months, there could be a problem. So go seek some medical advice. From myself and my team, inshallah, God willing, we get to do it again tomorrow.
The top stories this hour: dignitaries start arriving for the inauguration tomorrow, and Thailand to legalize same-sex marriages. A very good afternoon. Dignitaries have started arriving in the country ahead of the inauguration of the President of South Africa. Most of the leaders who will be attending the ceremony tomorrow are from the SADC region. Ditabatso Tetsi is at the Waterkloof Air Force Base in Pretoria.
The heads of state and governments who will attend the inauguration are from different countries in the SADC region and leaders of the regional organizations in Africa. The AU will be represented by the AU Commission's chairperson, Musa Faki Mahamat. Cuba has sent its Vice President, Salvador Valdez Misa, while other countries around the world will be represented by their ambassadors and high commissioners.